City Committee on Community and Economic and Development Committee, co-posted with Committee of the Whole, met in the City Chamber on today, Monday, April 22nd, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the matter below. Notice on this meeting was posted on April 12, 2019 at 10:03 a.m. This meeting will be recorded and televised by SCTV. Present here, that are part of the committee, Councilor Sargent, Councilor Peterson, and Councilor Milo. Absent are Councilor Josh Turiel. Subject of tonight's meeting is because the East River Watershed Association to discuss the net zero water use policy and any other matter use that might affect the city of Salem. The way we wanted to conduct this meeting tonight, we would like to invite Mr. Wayne to address City Council and to give any input. After that, we will open up to the public for any question or any suggestion that you might have. And then after that, we're going to bring it back to the City Council to discuss and make sure that we follow through any determination, any action that we should take. So I would like to ask at the moment Mr. Wayne to come and speak.
Just give a name when it's up.
Please, Mr. Wayne, for the records, just give your name and address.
Yeah, when you get up there, just give name and address for the record. Thank you. This is for Elaine. You want this?
Thanks very much.
I was told to bring handouts.
Well, you did a fine job. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Right here? It's my first time, so thank you. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. My name again is Wayne Castonguay. I'm the director of the Ipswich River Watershed Association. I live up in Ipswich, but I'm a native from Salem, so I'm pleased to be here and love the city. Another handout? Hold on here. Thank you very much. So our organization, for those of you who don't know, our mission is to protect and preserve the Ipswich River for public use and for fish and wildlife. As many of you know, the Ipswich River is the lifeblood of the North Shore, and most significantly, it's the engine in that it supplies drinking water to 13 cities and towns here on the North Shore, including Salem. Thank you for inviting me here today, and I'd love to hopefully build a little bit of conversation, and I'd like to get your advice and have a little bit of a dialogue in that I think, or we perceive that residents here in Salem will be hearing more and more about the Ipswich River and water in the coming year and few months, and I'll get into that in a little bit why. If you'd give me 5 or 6 minutes just to kind of give a little background to why we might be talking about water more here in the city. I've shared with you just a one-page fact sheet, and I don't know what your basis of understanding is. I've spoken to the Beverly City Council before, and folks said, start from the beginning. So I'm gonna start with that, and hopefully I don't say too much that you don't already know. But as I said already, the North Shore really depends on the Ipswich River. 13 cities and towns, including Salem and Beverly, get their water from the river. About 350,000 people and businesses drink from it every day, including here in Salem. Salem and Beverly are quite unique in that, being cities, Salem and Beverly use by far and away the most water from the river. About 11 million gallons a day on average is what you're allocated for, although your use is quite a bit below that right now. And that's about double your next biggest user. Most of the watershed are smaller towns like Topsfield, and so other comparable users are way up in Wilmington. And then the city of Lynn also gets a lot of their water from the Ipswich River, although only about half of their water. You all, I'm sure, know better than I that you're served by a semi-private water authority, much like the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority that serves much of Greater Boston. Beverly and Salem, years ago, back in the 1800s, petitioned the legislature to form this water authority, and then the two cities purchased their water for their residents and then distribute it. So the City of Salem Water Department, the city and Beverly have their own water departments, and then they're supplied by the Beverly and Salem Water Board. And that board operates 3 reservoirs in Wenham, Danvers, and they're named the Wenham Lake, the Longham Reservoir, and the Putnamville Reservoir. So none of your water comes from within Salem. It's all imported from outside the watershed. And many of you probably heard that the Ipswich River suffers from severe low flow challenges. And the reason for that primarily is the water balance is out of whack. More water is taken out than is replenished naturally. Cities like Salem and Lynn take the water from the watershed, use it, and discharge it directly to the ocean, as opposed to putting it back in the watershed and let it reuse. And if that cycle didn't happen, we wouldn't have that problem. So we advocate for recycling the water and putting it back. But again, we built these pipes a century or more ago, and I don't think we're going to undo that big infrastructure. So for a long time, the Ipswich River has been what we call in our business over-allocated. And you might remember about 15 years ago, the Ipswich River was declared one of the most endangered rivers in America, if you can believe it, because of this chronic low flow problem. A little bit of good news, Salem and Beverly, as you'll hear in a minute, are less of a big part of that problem because you use reservoirs and you do what's called flood skimming, where you'll take water when it's raining and flowing like now, and then you'll capture it in your reservoirs for summertime use. The chronic problems of low flow are primarily due to the smaller towns that don't have the luxury of storing that water like you do here in Salem. And they use and pump from the river every day, even in the summertime. And that's really a lot of the problem. But I will come back, hopefully, and at least make a case why Salem and Beverly should be concerned about that issue as well. One of the other interesting aspects of Salem and Beverly is that you actually own a 4th potential reservoir site in Topsfield, which never was built, but it really could play a very significant role in our future for increasing our water security as the climate changes and more people use the river or need it. I want to get a little technical, if I may, for a minute, because it really is important to understand a couple of technicalities when we talk about our new policy and the future. Water regulation in Massachusetts and across the state is very complicated, and really across the country for that matter. In 1986, the legislature passed this law called Water Management Act. Prior to 1986, water was free for anybody, anywhere for the taking. You could just take water and you didn't need a permit or anything. However, due to a series of huge droughts we had in the 1960s, after about 10 or 15 years, the legislature finally came around to creating what's called the Water Management Act. And what they did is they allowed everybody that was taking water at that point to register that volume of water. And that's what's called in the business registration. And remember that term because it'll become very significant. Salem, Beverly, like all the other towns that were pumping from the river, registered their water withdrawals at that point. And that water use is grandfathered. You have rights to that amount of water in perpetuity, and that was about 8 million gallons a day. And if you wanted more than that 8 million gallons, then you have to go to the state and apply for a permit. And when you get a permit, the Commonwealth does this great thing and put conditions to those permits and strings attached. Here in Salem, as in Beverly, though, you're still under your registered volume, so those strings that a lot of cities and towns have, such as water bans, water conservation measures, all those things are exempt, and Beverly and Salem, as a result, largely don't have to comply with any of those state regulations, which is a good thing. However, and why it's very significant and why I went into that technical background is that back in the 90s, Salem and Beverly's water use went over your registration, and at that point, you triggered the requirement for a permit. And so technically, on paper, Salem and Beverly have to comply with a permit. However, the Water Board appealed that permit, and it's really been in legal limbo for over 2 decades right now. But why this year is going to be important is that the state is going to be reissuing those Water Management Act permits, which are good for 20 years. So it's only once in a generation they come around, and that's happening this year. And the state is going to be asking the Salem Beverly Water Board to implement their permit for the first time ever. And that's going to be very significant in that if that permit is implemented, Beverly, Salem, and the other registered communities are going to actually have to comply with some conditions. For example, water conservation, fixing leaks, things of that nature, like many of the smaller towns around you have to comply with now. So it could be a big difference for Salem if in fact that permit is implemented. Also along with that permit is they actually would apply what's called a safe yield. And when they passed the Water Management Act, the legislature said that every water body in the state, every river, has to be calculated a safe yield over which you're not allowed to take water. One of the interesting things in the Ipswich is the state never did that. And finally, in 2014, they established a safe yield for the first time for the Ipswich River. And right now, the safe yield number for the Ipswich River is above what is allocated from the water withdrawals. So what that in effect means is that the water withdrawal that's coming out of the river are capped at that level, and there's no more water in the river to be had. So if the city wanted to increase their water allocation above what it is now, it's technically illegal to do so. So the end result of that is we are required to live within our existing allocations in perpetuity. Now, Salem isn't at its cap right now. Right now, it's about 8 million gallons a day. You're with Salem and Beverly combined, so you're slightly under that. But the challenge will be is every new development or every increase in water use will get us closer and closer to that cap. And that has significant ramifications, not as much perhaps for Salem, but for a lot of the communities that are above or at their cap right now. And as a result of that, and as a result of the 20-year permits coming up this year, we implemented this new policy, which is the front and back blue page here, called a net zero water use. Right now, what I just mentioned is largely unknown amongst most citizens and pretty unknown amongst most city and town governments throughout the watershed that this cap exists, and we're close to reaching it, and in some towns we're over that. And we feel that that's relatively easy to deal with, and as a result, we issued this policy, one, to increase public awareness of this issue, but most importantly, particularly for the cities and towns who are above or near that cap, we're offering tools to deal with that. And believe it or not, it's possible to grow without increasing water use, and that's what our policy and program is trying to achieve. So how's that achievable? First of all, when new development comes online, those developers can minimize water use to the extent possible. So really use state-of-the-art water conservation measures such as low-flow toilets, all the things we all understand to use water efficiently. Minimize outdoor water use, because in the summertime, 50% of the water that comes out of the river goes on lawns, so that can be minimized. And then the other way to get to net zero is developers, like they do now for affordable housing or other impact fees, can pay into what's called a water bank that would be established at the city level. And so they would have to pay to reduce water use elsewhere in the city. And so as a result, we can grow without increasing water demand at all. And that's the new policy we've implemented to allow us to live within our means. That said, there are other opportunities to bring more water into the watershed. The Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, for example, is flush with water right now. The Quabbin has about 5 years of surplus water stored in it. So if cities and towns don't want to deal with this net zero policy, they could import water from outside the watershed, so it's not such a dire situation. However, we prefer that everyone live off the Ipswich River and live within our means and adopt these pretty simple, straightforward measures to minimize water demand as new development comes online. And again, as I said, this issue might come to a head this year as that permit in the city is issued this coming year. And we are actually hopeful that City of Beverly and Salem don't appeal that permit this time around, because we prefer that everyone conserve water and treat water respectfully and implement water conservation across the board for all communities, so the regulations are more uniform. We think that's a real plus. So we look forward to working with the city as well on adapting to those measures if in fact they're introduced. So with that introduction, I would love to hear from you about, one, how we might try to spread the word amongst the community and get the word out, and then secondarily, just get your reaction to what we think is going to be a hot topic in the coming year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Let's the record reflect that Councilor Debo just joined us, and now you also, sorry, but this is my first meeting. I didn't recognize our good friend Tom. You introduce yourself, please, real quick. Tom? Tom then?
Dave Knowlton?
Dave
Knowlton.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
Sorry.
Dave Knowlton,
Yeah.
City Engineer, DPS Director.
Sorry about that. Anybody else from the planning or any other departments here?
Yeah, I'm Daria Mattis. I'm a planner and the conservation agent.
Thank you. I apologize for that. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we actually begin this discussion, I'd like to hear from Mr. Knowlton, if he has anything to add or anything to enlighten us from your side of the house in terms of what the city's going to be facing as well?
Sure.
Or anything in general that you just want us to know. Just so that we have the full, before we have a discussion.
Sure, yeah, from the city's perspective, and so you know, I'm the representative from Salem on the Water Supply Board. There's a representative from the city of Beverly that's a town official, the DPS Director in Beverly, and there's also a resident from Beverly and a resident from Salem that comprise the board, and there's also a chairman who lives outside of the Water Board's area, so they don't live in Salem or Beverly. So it's a 5-person board, and much like SESD, very well run, and does a great job treating the water, managing our watershed system, our reservoirs, to make sure that we have good, safe water and for drinking, and we have certainly the capacity to treat water into the future. The Water Board was enacted from state legislation back in 1913, I believe. So it was a state legislative act resulting from the Great Fire. At that time, there was a kind of a who's who of engineers that got involved, both from the state level, the cities and towns, and then the county of Essex County. Hazen from Hazen and Sawyer was part of it. Metcalf and Eddy were both involved. These were when they were back at MIT. They were still college professors. They hadn't started their great big engineering firms that are now world-renowned water supply engineers and wastewater engineers. So there was a lot of smart people that got together, and they created this, the Water Board, which was to treat and manage the watershed and provide drinking water for both the city of Salem and Beverly. When the Water Board was created, there were rights that were granted to the Ipswich River through the legislation to allow a certain amount of water to be taken. At the time, there was concerns that the Ipswich River ran dry or got very, very low in the summertime. So that was taken into account, and there was a withdrawal plan that was put in place, which basically says sometime in November to April or May is the only time that the city's water board can actually take water from those from the river and fill up those reservoirs. There's also stream elevation requirements in there. If the stream goes below a certain level, even if it's in that winter period, then the water board can't take water from the river. So during those times, it's most of the water is not being evaporated. It's not it's continuing through the river. So it's a kind of a good plan for being able to fill our reservoirs for that summer use that we've been able to have. That has continued. That hasn't changed since 1913. There has been some requests for increasing the amount of water that we take from the Ipswich River over the years. We invested in the Putnamville Reservoir when we constructed that. We as in the city of Salem and the city of Beverly, invested in water treatment plant capacity upgrades. And with each of those construction projects, those expansions of the system, we requested additional capacity, or the ability to draw more water, which we feel we're in a comfortable place right now to be able to meet the future demands of both communities through the Water Board. There was a change, as Wayne mentioned, back in the 80s, to go to a Water Management Act process whereby the state would create a registration that would limit the amount of water that communities could draw from not only the Ipswich watershed, but other watersheds through, across the state. And the Water Board did appeal that, and it is currently under appeal. And we continue to appeal it because we feel that we were given the rights to draw water and to be able to use that water as we need to over the years and into the future. And we think that's going to protect us as we go forward. The Ipswich River Watershed Association did join in that appeal. They are a party to the state, on the state side, in the kind of the argument, I guess, as to whether it's a valid reason to change and go to this Water Management Act and go to the registration rather than just rely on the previous registrations that we have, or the ability to draw the water out that we have. We have. Regardless, we think that we have the ability to take the water, and we're willing to defend that. We don't want to give that right up. And with this new permit action that's coming out, we'll likely take the same position, and it'll be up to a lot of engineers and consultants to get together in a room in front of a judge and argue whether it's, who is right. But we think we're in the right position, and we want to protect the city's availability, or the ability to provide water in the future. But nonetheless, we do understand that water conservation is a good thing, and we've been doing everything we can with the industry standards to reduce the amount of water that we use. If you look at the last 10 or 11 years of water use, you compare from 2008 to 2012, the average water use that we were using from the Water Supply Board, to the last 3 years that we've been using it, the amount of water we've been using has been reduced by 25%. So we are trying to conserve. We want to do the right thing. We don't want to be the neighbors to all the other North Shore communities that just don't care about water and use it whenever we want. It is true that we don't trigger any conservation efforts. There are other communities that do that, the smaller communities. Unfortunately, they did not invest in their systems at the time when Salem and Beverly did. So they're in that position where they're taking water during the summer periods when the Ipswich River is dry, is low, and there's consequences to that, so they have to limit the amount of water that they take. Our water usage has gone down, and we are always promoting water conservation. If you go onto the city website, you'll see water conservation hints and things that people can do. We have videos on there from the EPA on how to find water leaks into your house. We recently, over the past 5 years, we replaced all of our water meters and our water meter reading system. So we have come light years from where we were 10, 15 years ago to being able to monitor daily use from our residents. We can actually go in and look on an hourly basis if we need to, if there's some unusual circumstances. And I think you know that we've actually implemented a plan where over a period of time, if there's continued water use, we will actually send letters to our customers, to our residents, to say, hey, we've noticed there's been continuous 24-hour water use for a certain period of time. You need to think about hiring a plumber to check your house to see if there's a leak. So that's something that we've been doing, and we'll continue to do that. There's also, we've given out low-flow shower heads. We've given out the hose nozzles for outdoor water use that are low flow, and we also give out the red dye tablets to check your toilet to see if it's leaking. We've done all kinds of different things with different videos with EPA that the mayor's been involved with in the schools to get the word out that we need to conserve water, and we'll continue to do so. And it's also included in our annual consumer confidence report that we issue every year and send to every resident in the city, with hints on how to conserve water and the fact that it's something that we really need to do.
Thank you so much. I had to say that I had the opportunity to tour the plant with you last year, and I used to be the liaison, and you're doing a good job down in Beverly, and I commend you. So I open now for discussion. Question? You have any question for Mr. Councilor Peterson and then Councilor Bibo?
Okay, my questions are for David. Thank you. So This is really interesting. It's not something I know a lot about, so I have a couple of questions. One is really specific and one is more general. So I'll start with the more general. So you mentioned that there are a lot of things that we do that seem more like suggestions to help people do the right thing. Have we ever implemented anything that you would describe as like a requirement of new developments related to this topic over time?
No, other than the normal, when developments come in, we expect them to use low-flow toilets, things like that. It's kind of the standard norm now.
We expect them to, but it's nothing.
I can't speak to whether it's required or not.
Okay.
You have to go to the building inspector to find that out, but I would expect it's probably more common now than it was 10 years ago,
Okay.
that those things happen.
Pretty standard. And then the other question is just a curiosity on my part. Specific to my ward, because I've seen this a few times, and I know you've heard from me on this too. Down in one specific neighborhood, over time, people have had leaks related to their water meters. I'm not really, I'm not an expert, so I don't know how that works, but you mentioned that we've replaced a lot of them over the last few years. Is that related to this? Is the fact that we've seen so many, like I think it's specifically related to when there are bursts in the
Water
pipes
breaks.
on the roadways, and then when they get turned back on. Is that something that's always happened, or is that something related to the newer meters?
The newer meters have a disc on the bottom of them that pop off so that the disc releases water rather than have the water pressure increase that comes through damage the meter. So
Okay.
it's a way for the meter to protect itself.
Okay.
It does happen when we have a sudden surge in pressure through
Okay.
there, and most of the time it's happened when we've had a water break on Highland Ave, the
Right.
16-inch water main, where we have the booster pump station that keeps the level high. It's our high pressure zone, and if that goes on too fast and we don't have enough hydrants open to relieve that pressure as we're filling the system back up, the pressure can find those weak spots, which would be the meters, and they could pop off.
Okay,
So that has happened.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Debo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Cascaway, but I have a couple for Dave first, if I can start with our city engineer. Sorry, Wayne.
Dancing back and forth.
We just stay there till we're all done, I guess. It's good to see you. Thank you for being here. I was one of the recipients about 5 years ago of one of those letters that you sent out. Just so you know, Mr. Chair, and everybody else knows, my toilet was leaking. I could not hear it. I could not hear it filling, and it was leaking kind of nonstop, very quietly. And older toilets, you can hear the water coming in. This is a fairly new toilet that was leaking, and you could not hear water coming in or going out. Couldn't see any bubbles, nothing. So I got a letter from your department. I'm like, really? So I asked them, what does this really mean? You probably have a leaky toilet. And they gave me a couple of water tabs. I put them in my 2 toilets. Yep, one was leaking. And boom, we fixed it right away with a new part from FW Web. Cost me about $10 or whatever it was. A little bit more than that. But anyway, excellent response. I was not a city councilor at the time. I was just an average resident. I got a letter in the mail 5 years ago, I think it was 6 years ago, whatever it was. And I fixed the problem with short money. And I'm conscious about this stuff. I didn't even know there was a problem. So keep doing what you're doing there. A couple fast questions. Can you list who the voting members are of the board? You said...
All 5 are.
All 5.
So there's a chairman, there's 2 municipal
What are
reps.
the names?
Bruce Thibodeau is the chairman, and then Mike Collins and myself are the public services directors from each, and then David Pavick from Beverly and Anthony, I apologize, I can't remember his
Salem?
name. For Beverly. David Pavick is the Salem,
Right.
and Anthony begins with an S, I can't remember his name.
Okay.
For now, you-
I can get it for
That's
you.
fine, I was just curious. I'm glad that our old
It's all-
assistant city engineer is on that board. He's very, I'm talking about Mike Collins. Like yourself, he's very knowledgeable and represents their community and the whole board very well. Dave Pavick is a good engineer. Both those guys worked for me a long time ago when they were kids. I wasn't sure the 2 were on there. What are some other water conservation measures that we've done? You mentioned a couple. Have we done anything major, and what else should we be doing as the city of Salem?
Well, we do leak detection citywide every year. That's something annually that we go out and we listen on hydrants and valves, and we determine, typically done at night, we determine if there's leaks that are out in our system that necessarily have not risen to the surface and are starting to show water on the paved surface or the ground. But there can be leaks that are under the ground, so we do spend considerable time finding those. We do, actually, with these meters that we have, there's an ability for homeowners to actually go with a high-powered flashlight and actually turn the meter on, and they can see if water is moving, see if their meter is moving. There's also a little digital display that comes up. It's in the form of a faucet that shows water dripping if the meter thinks you have continuous water use. So it's something that we can let the homeowner know, or the homeowner can go check themselves to see. You don't necessarily have to wait to get a letter from us. You can go down periodically and check and see if there's that kind of response on the meter.
Can you get this committee some numbers through the chair? Thank you, Mr. Chair. You look good sitting there, by the way. This is your first committee chair.
Don't get me nervous.
Today is. Nice job. It's good. I had to point that out. Can you get us some details on where we are today? You said that we're 25% below from 2008 to 2012. We're down 25% per average per customer.
Per total amount of water that we take from the water board.
We're down 25%?
Yes.
From what we were taking previously?
Yep.
Even with some growth happening in Salem?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm sure you have some projections based upon the number of hundreds of units that we're building right now and about to build going forward as well. Where will we be at? Do you have an idea now?
I can put that together for you.
Yeah, can you give us the beef on if we're going to be in trouble in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or not at all? Okay, some real numbers based upon the number of units that we have now and what we're about to have.
Yep.
There's a lot of units under construction right now and a lot more proposed. And a lot of people are worried. I think Mr. Castleberg is worried. We're going to be taking out more water. The golf course here in Salem, we have a municipal golf course. Years ago, it was fed by Salem Public Works water. We built a giant water well, and I'm not sure if we're still using it today or if we're using a combination. That's a huge volume of water for our golf course, and those numbers are kind of hidden in the system because it's a city use.
Yeah.
Where are we at with the well and using public water on the golf course?
I couldn't tell you if the well is still being used. I know we meter all the water that goes in from the city side. I can find out if there's any well use that's mixed with that.
Yep.
I don't think there is, but I can find out.
Can you get the numbers? We put a gate, a meter on the well as well, so we know how much wood, this is years ago I'm talking about, so that we would know how much water we're taking from the well and how much we'd be saving from not using city water. Can you give us I won't spend a whole lot of time, but give us the details on that to some degree.
Certainly.
Okay. Can you also talk about the looping and the dead ends and a possible another water tank, and if that will help our situation and help the river as well? We talked about doing some looping in the city on Loring Avenue, on Highland Avenue, and then maybe even linking the two dead-end sections together along Swampscott Road on that section, and having a line that made the whole city a loop, and also doing another water tank behind the Walmart up on the hill there.
Right, on Highland Ave.
Yes.
Those two things relate to, first is water quality for the loops. Getting rid of the dead ends is, you have pipes that just don't go anywhere and you have limited use to those. It's typically a smaller pipe. The water age can rise in that, and so you lose quality of the water. If you loop it, you'll get better circulation of water, so it increases the water quality. Not necessarily, it doesn't do anything for the demand or the use of the water in that situation. The water tank out on Highland Ave would replace the booster station that we have. Right now, we have a booster station that pressurizes that whole system. If we get a tank behind Walmart or in that area, that would be at a higher elevation. We could fill the tank at night when we need to, and then just let, during the day, the tank would flow out, kind of like what Gallows Hill does right now. That would be dedicated to just the high-pressure zone. So that would really be just operating pressures and fire flow protection.
My question would be on the water tanks, if we could fill them during rain events, if you would, or draw down during winter. I think that would help the whole overall situation. Maybe Wayne can speak to that more. But if we had that second tank, we could fill them both up, fill the reservoirs up during the winter and during rain events. so that we're capturing more water and hurting the river less. Is that doable, or is that a fair statement?
For the tank, no, it wouldn't be, because you have an age water issue. You don't want to have water sitting in that tank for a long period of time. You want to keep that moving through the tank so that you don't lose that water quality. So you want it filled every day and then drain down, then filled it back up. So you want to keep the water not very mature, is the way to put it. You want to have just a few days maybe worth of water in those tanks, and not a whole time, just a different time frame. Water reservoirs, on the other hand, that's raw water that gets brought in, and from the reservoir, where it sits in the reservoir, it gets drawn into the treatment system and gets treated as needed, and then distributed to Salem and to Beverly.
One last question, Mr. Chair, if I may. I learned something today, and I was surprised to hear this. I'm the former conservation administrator for Salem back in the 80s and 90s, but it amazed me that Wayne said, Mr. Castaway said that we have a possible the fourth reservoir, that we own the land, or, I've never heard this before. Where is this?
It's in Topsfield, near Route 1. There's an area of land that the Water Board is always looking to protect the watershed area. We're always looking at properties that are adjacent to the watershed for acquisition to further protect the quality of water, to limit growth, development around the watershed. There has been plans in the past. It really hasn't been needed to come to fruition at this point, but there has been talk about, and there's been some land that's been purchased for another watershed area, another reservoir near Route 1. But there's some challenges with where it is on Route 1. It's a very heavily traveled road. It's something that we would have to spend some time to really develop if it was needed. But it's something that we're kind of holding as a insurance, that if we have to do that, we could certainly try and do that.
If that's something that we don't really need, and these other towns have not done planning, is that something that we can kind of lease to them, to let them create a reservoir so that they're not drawing down so much in the winter, drawing down so much in the summertime?
I don't know. You would have to have infrastructure, you'd have to have pipes there to provide the water to wherever, and they'd have to have treatment capacity to be able to do that. I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. I have a couple for Mr. Castaway.
Yeah. You want to let all the...
Yes, absolutely.
Anybody else have any questions? For Mr. City Engineer?
I just one question there, if I could, is only because there's talk of a connection around Benton Square with Marblehead, which would connect us to the MWRA. Is there a valve, such a valve, and are we exercising it and having it ready? And
So we have a number of different interconnections with all of our neighbors, with Peabody, with Danvers, with Beverly, and with Marblehead. And that connection is in Loring Avenue,
Yeah.
where they have their pump station
Yeah.
off of Loring Ave before you get into Benton Square. So we do have interconnections to be used if needed on an emergency basis.
good.
And we do exercise those, so we know where they are. We have GIS plans that show exactly where they are. Peabody recently had some issues with their water treatment plant where they had to take it offline, and we had serious discussions about providing water to them. Ultimately, they decided to go with the MWRA for a temporary connection, but we're always willing to help our neighbors and work those things out. There's potential for connection to the MWRA for the city of Salem, whether it's through Swampscott or through Lynn, but it's a very expensive proposition. You have to buy into the MWRA system, so there's a buy-in fee. Their water is very expensive. It's much more expensive than the water we produce now and consume, and the water quality is different. So we would really have to look hard at whether, our system, if we had shared use or whatever, shared water systems, water sources, whether that really makes sense to do. At this point in time, we don't think we need to do that.
Okay, good. Just thinking about a backup, in an emergency.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any question for Mr. Wayne Castañeda at this point? Anybody? Councilor Debo?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Wayne, it's good to see you here tonight. I've known you for some 30-odd years. I just want to let you all know, I've known him for a bunch of years, and years ago, 3 decades ago, I had the highest respect for him and his qualifications. And we have many mutual friends that are marine biologists. Brad Chase for one.
Yeah.
Many others. I'll get into the shark expert on a different discussion.
Yeah.
but they all have the highest respect for this man. So we're lucky that he's here, not only giving us advice, but also looking out for our interests in the river and the entire watershed. So thank you for what you do. It's a good thing. I'm not patting your back. You do good work, and you have a lot of respect from other of your peers. So he's a straight shooter is what I'm trying to get at. Okay? Wayne, I don't want to put you on the pressure on the spot or anything, but we talked a lot about things like a cloud here. I'd like to hear some beef, the specifics. What can and should the city council do to help the Ipswich River based on where we are today with how we draw down differently than other towns? Specifically, what should we do as a city council? What should the public, the residents of Salem and the business of Salem be asked to do? And what can we require, in fairness, what can we require them to do? And what can the city of Salem, specifically the water division and the engineering department, specifically do in your opinion, and we can make each one of these do that? Or some things we might want to suggest that they do this?
Great question. Just let me preface that by saying, and as I think Mr. Knowlton reiterated, that Beverly and Salem are in relatively good shape compared to other communities along the river. You invested over a century ago in your water system and stored winter water, or flood skimming as we call it, to store it for future summer use is a preferred method to protect the river. And so you're doing good things right now. And as Mr. Knowlton indicated, water use overall has gone down over the last couple of decades, which is a good thing. However, I think we're at a potential inflection point, and also here in Salem and Beverly, in that for the first time ever, we're looking at limits, mandatory limits from the Ipswich River. So the existing allocation, which you're allowed to take here in Salem, is capped in perpetuity right now. So although there is still a decent buffer between use and that cap, our message is let's think about that and look ahead. And also, because of that buffer and the fact that you have such a robust reservoir system, including a potential new reservoir site, Salem and Beverly, believe it or not, although you are under no requirement, hold the key to the rest of the watershed, because as Mr. Knowlton indicated, with the interconnections of all the cities and towns around Beverly and Salem and your excess storage capacity or in your great infrastructure, you could really hold the key to reducing the overall river's problem by working together with your surrounding communities. So that's a message we have. One is that we need to think a little more strategically about the future because that cap is there. Secondly, Beverly and Salem really do hold the key to protecting the river as a whole if we were to work more closely with our neighbors who are much more or less water resilient than we are here in Salem. The surrounding groundwater communities, those communities that are on wells, don't have reservoirs, are right up against their cap. And they're the ones that really cause the river to go dry in the summer because they pump the most in the summer when there's the least amount of water in the river. And a big study just came out the last 2 years that was spearheaded by all of these communities. So Wenham, Danvers, Topsfield, Linfield, and Middleton all got together and did a series of studies following the devastating drought of 2016, which was a real shock to everybody dependent on the river. And those studies basically concluded that in order to meet future growth and development, in order to be more resilient in the light of climate change and increased drought, which are anticipated in the future, we've got to work collectively. And again, that's the hard message for you all because you are relatively resilient. So what incentive do you have to work with your neighbors? However, but from a watershed perspective and for the resiliency for the next century, the more we can work together and help each other out, we can protect ourselves for forever against these future droughts, but also reduce the impact collectively on the river. So it's a hard ask, I think, for Salem and Beverly in particular, where you're not as dire straits as some of the other towns, but ultimately it's going to behoove us all, I think, to start thinking about these things collectively and on a wider level. And to get around to your question about specifically, one, I would really encourage the city and the Water Supply Board and to ask the city to influence the Water Supply Board to work collectively with us and the neighbors for a collective plan. Right now, Senator Bruce Tarr is heading up what's called the Ipswich River Task Force, and the groundwater communities are very motivated to be part of that. Salem and Beverly have not been participating as of yet because you have less incentive, to be blunt, than they do. But I would encourage the water board to be active participants in that process that the senator is spearheading as a result of those big studies that came out that said we have to work together and we have to pursue alternative sources. So that's number one. Secondly, take water conservation voluntarily more serious, particularly with regard to new growth and development. Every new project that comes online is one less gallon that's going to be available for everybody else going forward. Well, we might not be against that cap now, in the not too distant future we will be, so let's be a little proactive about that. And every development that comes before city boards actually ask them to develop with net zero increase in water use. And that can be done, as I said earlier in my introduction. One, minimize their water use to the extent possible, and then secondly, help the city reduce water use elsewhere in the town. And those things can be pretty easily done. Again, we're initiating a big new initiative right now that's going to be finished this year to develop a whole suite of tools for cities and towns to use to grow in a net zero neutral way. And then I'd say finally, the last thing is, as I mentioned earlier, it really gets into the weeds with the regulations. But when the state asked Salem and Beverly to finally, for the first time, accept the permit as opposed to appealing it, we would respectfully request that that permit not be appealed. It's expensive, it creates an antagonistic relationship, and that permit is over 2 million gallons a day, and if you don't have that permit, that's 2 million less gallons that'll go into the system that's not yours. I think, and we think, the trade-off for those 2 million gallons to make Salem and Beverly more resilient in exchange for basic conservation measures, these conditions, in our opinion, are not that onerous that all the other cities and towns live under. I think it's a fair bet to keep that $2 million on 2 million gallons a day on your books. Otherwise, that 2 million gallons a day that's regulated by that permit that has never been implemented is water you legally cannot take. So we feel that having that permit go into effect this year is a benefit to everyone, including the city. So those are the few things that I would recommend.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else from the city? Councilor Milo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. You had mentioned a number of communities, I think Danvers, Hamilton, Wenham, Topsfield, et cetera, who, if I understand this correctly, did not invest in their infrastructure way back when, and that's why, or that's a piece of why they have to draw in the summer now. Do you know of any plans that these communities might have to invest in their infrastructure so that they can be less of a burden on the system?
Yeah, I wouldn't put it as the fact that they didn't invest in their infrastructure. What happened is, unlike the well-established cities like Lynn and Salem and Beverly, these are smaller suburban communities which were rural for most of their existence. And it wasn't until the 70s and 80s when they had a good big growth spurt that they needed this more water. And that growth spurt happened to accompany big 2-acre suburban lawns. So per capita wise, they use way more water than the cities do, which tend to be smaller units and less land use. And so they were up against it at that point. At that point, most of the land was gone, so you couldn't buy up a reservoir site, or you couldn't find alternatives. You were kind of stuck with drilling wells. And so that's kind of the situation. So they had fewer options than I think the proactive cities did back in the day when there was less regulation and more land available. And so right now they're forced to live on groundwater, which are shallow wells right adjacent to the river, and they essentially take directly from the river because of the hydrology there. And these lawns get thirsty in the summertime, and everyone uses more water in the summertime. And so it's really a double whammy for these cities and towns. What options exist for them is to work collectively and to share water. Right now, there are no new reservoir sites like there is in Topsfield. That's probably the last one in the whole Commonwealth of Massachusetts that's there, ready to go. We're really fortunate to have that. It's virtually impossible to build such things nowadays anywhere in the state. We're really lucky that we have that potential site there. And so what really is necessary to solve their problems, not necessarily here, is either develop that site or trade water with the MWRA and have the cities share water more proactively. And that's ultimately the solution and our big message today. And again, it's a tough ask for Salem and Beverly. You have less incentive to work with your peers. But ultimately, it would behoove, I think, everybody to work more collectively.
Thank you. Councilor Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you mention when you first started talking tonight that you have spoken to Beverly City Council as well?
Yeah, we spoke to them, and we have a request to go before them again this year for an update.
Okay, you spoke to them on this particular ask?
Not since the net zero policy came out.
Okay, I was just
new.
curious if you had spoken to them, what their reaction was.
Yeah, that's next.
Okay, okay, I think, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Also, we can go to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Now we're going to open it to the
Thank you.
public. If anyone have any question, please stand up to the podium, name, and address for the record. We're going to start this way, and we're just going to follow.
So you're going to have to come back up because it's a question for you. So Polly Wilbert, 7 Cedar Street. My question is, for example, we know that Middleton has just purchased the golf course and that they're going to move a number of their town facilities to that golf course. But it strikes me that a golf course is an opportunity to do some kind of water retention. It's got to be a lot of acreage. Can a town like Middleton or any of the other 11 towns that share the Ipswich River be creative about water retention beyond creating an enormous reservoir? Are there creative ideas that are happening now in the country that are smaller water retention facilities in light of communities that have built out fairly significantly and that could be interspersed? I'm thinking of a Frederick Law Olmsted type of a thought, about like the Fens and linking together some smaller water retention facilities.
It's a great question. Our number one solution always is water conservation. It's what we say in our business, the first resort. We here on the North Shore, not so much in the cities, but certainly in the suburban towns like Milton, use a lot more water than is necessary, so it's always cheaper to use less water. Then when you use as little as you need to, then you think of alternative solutions, because every alternative beyond that is expensive. And in terms of micro storage and sites, as Mr. Knowlton said, even talking about a giant water tank off of Highland Avenue, those things only hold a few days worth of water. You'd be amazed how quickly a several million gallon water tank will go. So you really need big facilities to store any meaningful amount of water. And then you also need the right geology and the right landforms. And with the regulations, as I said earlier, it's virtually impossible to build these things anywhere right now. So we have to really, probably the next solution is what we already have available. Your existing reservoirs, for example, just implementing water conservation measures in Salem and Beverly could probably save another 10-20% of your water use. That alone would feed almost all the communities around you. That third reservoir site that I mentioned in Topsfield, that would be a lot more feasible than some of the measures you liked. And we also heard that MWRA was all around us as well. There's interconnections in all the southern communities, and just opening a valve, even though the water is much more expensive than local water, that often, because that capital expense has already been made, that often is still a more cost-effective way than some of the ideas, although what you're thinking is obviously something that people think about a lot. But when you get into the economics, there's almost always a different choice that usually is more cost-effective.
Anybody else? Scott? We can go this way.
Hi, my name is Scott Sheehan. I'm at 39 Harbor Street, Unit 1, and I'm on the Salem Conservation Commission, but I'm not here speaking on behalf of the commission. I work at Hanscom Air Force Base, and I just wanted to throw a comment out there. Executive order has required us to go to, all new facilities have to be either net zero energy, net zero water, or net zero waste, starting in fiscal year 20. And so the technology is developing that can do that, and where you can achieve that without developing something new. And that's on the conservation side. So I would encourage the city council, if you do pursue that, you hate to put requirements on new development and all that kind of stuff, but it's where building technology is going. And in that same aspect, not just levying, commitments on the behalf of Salem and Beverly, but as the region. So all these other communities that are withdrawing water during the summer, we should have consistent development practices across the region if we go that way. And I had something else too. I think Councilor Milo had mentioned something, or maybe it's Councilor Dibble, about the land that we have in Topsfield. And I don't think that the city of Salem or Beverly necessarily have to develop that into a reservoir, but offer that to the other communities around the local areas so that they can solve the problem as well, so that we don't have the capital expenses associated with that. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else right here?
Good evening and happy Earth Day. Ann Sterling, 29 Orchard Street in Salem. So there are other inhabitants in Essex County besides just humans, and I wonder if Mr. Castlegate could address when the river goes dry in the summer, or what happens to the wildlife, the fish, insects, whatever that use the river as various parts of their reproduction. I mean, I think it kills off various levels of the food chain, and I was wondering, where and when are they represented at all in this? Thank you.
That's a question for you, Mr. Wayne.
That's a great question. Obviously, we always talk about people first, but our mission is equal people and nature. And obviously, that's what's driving a lot of our concern is we feel very strongly that there's enough water for people and nature. And right now, because of the imbalance, nature really takes it on the chin in our river in the summer in particular. We really felt this really more than ever with the drought of 2 years ago when large stretches of the river went dry. And obviously, when there's no water, there's no life. And virtually all the fish in the river did die 2 years ago. And particularly, it takes years, if not decades, if ever, for things to recover because various organisms have many-year life cycles. And this is a constant and chronic challenge. So what we have are young fish, small fish, and a lot of the native species can't tolerate the river any longer. And it's really a tiny amount of water that we're talking about. It's far less than we use. It's not so much how much water, but when and where. And so it's those groundwater withdrawals in the summertime that really drive this issue. You've probably heard several years ago, a few of the communities in the upper river, Reading, switched to the Quabbin Reservoir several years ago. Ironically, during that drought of 2016, the lower river went dry, but the upper river, which is the poster child that we've all heard in the news decades ago, stayed wet during the drought. So it really proves that it can have a dramatic impact. So again, it's the message is the river is quite devastated right now due to water withdrawals, and the life of the river is suffering, and this is something we can control. We've got all the studies, we've got all the work, the recommendations, we know what needs to be done. And again, our message is let's try to work together to solve this once and for all. It's really within our reach right now.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for having Wayne here and having this discussion, because it's one of the most interesting things I've listened to in this chamber in a long time. Not that you don't have other interesting things, but it was really very thought-provoking. And I think it behooves our city to use your leadership skills to raise the bar on our new development and really come up with some ways to require, as you were saying, net zero use for energy as well as for water.
Thank you. Can we have your name and
I'm sorry,
address?
Jennifer Firth, 3 Carpenter Street.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Jim Carney, 1.5 Cambridge Street. Wayne, I think that several years ago, maybe a bunch of years ago, we mandated, or the feds mandated, low-flow toilets and that kind of thing. Could you talk about that for a bit? Maybe how long have low-flow toilets been de rigueur, that kind of thing?
Maybe Mr. Knowlton can help me here, because devices and appliances aren't my specialty. But as I understand it, this is all because of the plumbing code. And there were sort of 2 generations. When I grew up, toilets used 5 to 8 gallons per flush. And then the first iteration was maybe 20 years ago. I think it was down to 1.6. And now the new ones are 1.1, I think, is the new code. So it's really made a big difference. Toilets are the #1 water use historically user in our homes, and accounting for half of our water use typically in the average house, believe it or not, except the 2-acre lawn, but the average house was about half. And a lot of the water use reduction that Mr. Knowlton cited has been a result as the changing out of all these old toilets. It's had a huge difference, and literally a lot of people have seen the water use decline by half when you go to a 1.1 per gallon flush. But again, I'm not an expert on that, but it's probably been the single biggest water conservation measure across the country then was that plumbing code change.
You wanted me to, okay. Anybody else have any comment, question? No, we're just going to bring it back to City Council right now to discuss or any recommendation. Anybody have any suggestion?
It's good. Can I ask Wayne one more question too? Wayne, some of the towns that are taking the water when the river's at its lowest, I thought you meant they were pumping it out of the river. They're just taking it from the groundwater through their wells. Now, are those towns all well dependent for the whole town? I've heard of some towns that have no water pipes, everything's based on wells.
Yeah, the vast majority of water withdrawals in most communities is exclusively well water. However, to get the volume you need, you have to dig what's called shallow gravel packed stream-side wells. So usually they're only 20, 30 feet below the ground. They're usually right adjacent to the river because they get replenished and recharged from the river immediately. They're really no different hydrologically than a straw right from the river. So almost every town has 100% well water. So Topsfield, Wenham, Hamilton, and then upriver Wilmington, North Reading, all well water. The only other towns that have reservoirs like you do here are Danvers and Peabody. And so Danvers shares their water system with Middleton, but Danvers and Peabody also have wells as well to supplement their reservoirs. But everybody else, Linfield, I forgot to mention, is all on groundwater as well.
So that would take a lot of infrastructure to get water pumped in from a Wenham Lake or MWRA. It would take infrastructure all through the town. That would be quite a cost to get water that's piped in into
the vast majority of the infrastructure is already in place because everyone has emergency connections. We've estimated that 1 mile of pipe from the MWRA to Peabody would basically allow all of this to be solved. The challenge, as Mr. Knowlton indicated, is the water quality, because every water system has a different water quality, and you all heard what happened in Flint, Michigan. It wasn't necessarily that water was bad, but it was more corrosive, so it caused the pipes to leach lead. And so that's the issues, and that's the complexity. It's not as much infrastructure, but it's blending different water sources that is the complexity.
Thank you. Yeah, so for me, after hearing that, it'd be nice if we ever needed new water that I could pump to Wenham Lake and was able to use our filtration system that we used to use in the Salem Beverly water supply, but that wouldn't help the other towns.
Yeah, I think the easiest solution would be for the water board to be like a mini MWRA and use its great infrastructure and just support a few more towns on its border. That really is probably the simplest answer. Nothing simple in this business, but having Salem Beverly Water Board really service more of the communities, that'd probably be the most straightforward solution.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we have any suggestion on where we want to?
I just suggest we keep it. This seems like something that will stay in committee a long time because it's something that's it's not new, but it's a new take on an issue, and I think it's something we're going to have meetings on, from month to month and year to year.
So you make a motion to keep it in committee?
A motion to keep it.
Do we have any second?
Unless anybody else has any.
Second.
Second by Councilor Milo. All in favor? Any discussion or any?
I'm just wondering, I'm in favor of keeping it in committee too, but I am wondering whether we should have some action steps for the next meeting. And like bringing numbers or something that we want to learn next time. I know that was something you had suggested, and maybe maybe we could bring Tom St. Pierre next time to talk about the code. I don't know if that would be helpful to the discussion.
So if I hear clearly, you wanted to present a friendly amendment to Councilor Sargent so he can add, keep it in committee and bring somebody else.
Tom St. Pierre and other experts that could add to the discussion.
Councilor Debo?
I absolutely agree. I think this committee should take some action and not just put it in committee. I think it should stay in committee so that you can immediately call for additional meetings, additional hearings on this, Mr. Chair. So that's a good thing to keep it in committee. It'll be faster to have you act rather than have to go through the city council again to remand it down to you. So I agree with both my councils on my left. But I wholeheartedly agree with Council Peterson that we should be taking action. And I don't know exactly what that action is yet. It needs to be formulated. Perhaps we can get some testimony from our conservation administrator who's here today, if they have any ideas. But I think it's more the planning board, the building inspector, the zoning board of appeals, the chairs of those two boards and the director of the building department and the planning department to see what we already have now and what more we can do for new development, as well as our existing houses and businesses throughout the city that are already here. There's a lot of it we can't require, but there's a lot of it that we can recommend. But for new construction, we can absolutely require things that are fair.
Okay.
Not just for houses, but for condominiums, for apartments, and for businesses. Something that's fair, that's not overwhelming and costly. It's state of the art now. It's cost effective. We should take some action, Mr. Chair, and not just sit on this.
I totally agree. Can we hear anybody else? So, in the motion that Councilor Sargent just submitted to keep it in committee, with the amendment of Councilor Peterson to bring St. Pierre
and other experts.
Another expert to discuss it and take some actions. All those in favor?
Can I make a second recommendation?
Yeah.
too? Is that we ask the Conservation Commission to review this net zero water policy and water use policy and possibly make some recommendations back to us,
Okay.
please.
Okay, I hear that amendment from Councilor Sargent. Everybody's in favor of that? Not okay. That's what I say. So, anything else you want to add, or we?
Mr. Chair, not being a member of your committee,
Yeah.
so I'm not able to vote.
Yeah.
But I absolutely thank you for doing this. This is long, long overdue. But please don't sit on it. Please set another meeting, bringing the information that we've asked for from both the Conservation Commission and for the the Public Works Director, and schedule another meeting, and let's keep the ball rolling.
Sounds good. We have any motion to,
Motion to adjourn?
Councilor Milo, motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Meeting is over. Thank you so much.